I love stories. It is rare that I sit down and truly appreciate the power of them. In a sense, most of society was shaped by stories. They teach us valuable lessons in a way that I believe creates a much deeper yet unspoken understanding. Not to say that people cannot attach themselves to lessons and take them throughout their life, but stories. Stories can truly be carried throughout a person's life nearly unaltered. Whether it's a childhood story your parents used to tell you, the best book you ever read, or simply a chapter of your own book of life. Stories shape who we are, and it is why I find it to be such a beautifully powerful medium. A man can make the same mistake 1,000 times and never learn. But turn that man's suffering into folklore, and 1,000 young boys may never make that mistake once. I believe that the general populace forgets about stories from time to time, at least how they work. We do a lot of talking now. How to be better, how to be confident, how to achieve self-actualization. Forgetting that the most effective way to convey the path you would like someone to take is by simply putting them in those shoes and letting them walk it first. The tortoise and the hare taught us to take things slow. Humpty Dumpty taught us to never stay down, and Jack and the Beanstalk taught us to take advantage of the opportunities offered to us. It was stories like these that laid the foundation for children everywhere for decades, and it makes me wonder what stories will lay the foundation for the children of tomorrow. Will they be given the same stories? Will they be given stories with a happy ending? Will they be given stories at all? But I think, most important of all, what will they take from the stories they get to see for themselves? What will you take from those stories? Every story has chapters, sometimes explicitly said and other times not. Life has chapters in much the same vein. Many a time we read other stories from afar and notice chapters that should have ended a long time ago. Painful relationships that have lasted too long, vices and habits, and sometimes just someone stuck in their ways. I find myself so quick to judge those people. Why not just close the chapter? I often think that to myself, but it was only just recently that I realized that I don't even know what chapter I'm in, or when it's supposed to end. I don't even get the chance to truly read it until it's over. Just as an author feels as though they are done writing, we do not finish writing each chapter of our own life until we personally believe that it is over. When that is, we don't know until then. But when these chapters do end, I find it hard to ignore one of the great patterns of stories, especially ones that are tied to real people. While not every time, a truly impactful story is almost entirely defined by how it starts and how it ends. Stories generate feelings, and feelings are the sole reason stories are so powerful. And while the climax of a story invokes the most feelings, it is difficult to deny the lingering of emotions that comes from a fluid beginning and end, or the opposite feeling that comes from an abrupt ending. All of your relationships are stories. Relationships with people, animals, things, and places, all of which had a start and an end. For conciseness, I'll focus on people. Whether the start of the relationship was positive or negative, a long-term one is typically positive. Whether initially a bad interaction turned positive or you hit it off right away. Those initial feelings of excitement run through you. The discovery of a new best friend or romantic partner feels incredible, and immediately that optimism shines through in your words, actions, and thoughts. Thoughts of what life will be like years from now, how you will grow with each other, how much fun life will still be when you're both still being yourselves years later. But every story marches forward, and every mold is eventually broken. No person fits the same mold as the day you met, years later. their story must continue as well. Many will adapt and form a new story together, and others will be forced to close that chapter and allow their stories to split. Some with a simple turning of the page, and others with tearing it out of their book entirely. And I'd like to focus on the latter for a minute, the tearing of the page. Usually an action to signify the abrupt ending, the failure of the story to reach a satisfying conclusion, one that ties everything together. We as humans long for that, the satisfying conclusion. That being said, I truly believe most people forget who is writing the story and often don't take responsibility for writing the satisfying conclusion themselves. So they tear out the page. They remove a story chock full of amazing lessons and powerful memories, all because when they think back to it, they don't think about those. They think about the dissatisfaction they had about its end and how it made them feel. I implore you to remind yourself who the author is and understand that you get to write the story while also keeping in mind that whoever you are interacting with has the right to write theirs. I ask that you consider the end of your chapters. Did the ending satisfy you? Was it what you expected? And if not, as painful as it might be, I implore you to leave the page in the book. I would never tell someone to keep a person, place, or thing in their life that does not belong. But to oust the lessons that they taught you in their departure, I don't think is wise. I say this because stories, the ones we so desperately want to tear from our book and never look at again, those stories are the most powerful. The difference between becoming something else and staying as you are. It takes so much time to reread a chapter when it's over, to truly understand it. To tear it out of your book is to rob yourself of that understanding, to sacrifice all that time writing it to end up as waste. A man of 1,000 mistakes never learned his lesson because he tore out his page every time, convinced himself that the next story he wrote would be better. Instead, he would simply forget what he wrote and wrote the same story again and again. The 1,000 young boys wrote their own stories, separate from his, because they already knew how his ended, probably more than he did. Close your chapters when the writing is done, because no one wants to run out of time. No one wants the book to end abruptly, especially before the climax. Keep the pages in, even the really bad ones. Just because they weren't happy doesn't make them any less a part of the story. And to remove them keeps the reader from understanding who the character truly is. I love stories, the triumphant and the tragic, the comedic and the romantic, because each one of them has a piece of someone in them, a piece that I can learn from. I just hope that when I finally close my book, others will be able to say the same for me.